The subject of your going into the prison, I found very fascinating.
Yes.
You went into the prison.
It was out here on the West Coast.
Okay. And do you want to explain that story, what you discovered?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. It really, I've done a lot of work in prison with COs, we call them, the correctional officers, and also with prisoners, and I've enjoyed that work. But one time, I guess I knew about, contraband, but, I didn't really understand the process. And one time, one of the COs, the correctional officers, one of the guards, took me into a back room, and he showed me all of the instruments that, some prisoners have spent time creating. And, they would rip pieces of chairs off, and they would make things like, a knife or a switchblade. They would, pull off a piece of wood and a little piece of the toilet seat, and they would make another type of weapon. And it really hit me when I was in looking at it because it bothered me. Here, these people inside, these prisoners, are really maximizing who they are. They're being creative in an incredible way. But for what?
Yeah.
For not the right thing. And it hit me as we started looking at the Hungry Spirit. We can be the best we can be for the wrong reason. And
Yeah.
I think those two need to go together. And that's our point, I think, about spending a whole chapter on purpose. What is our high purpose? How do we, we can be passionate about stealing money, but is that the purpose that we're here for? And is it the high purpose that we should live our life for? And so, there are with everything, there's an exploration of making sure that, we're not making people hungry to do wrong things.
Right. We can be constructive or destructive,
Absolutely.
and make the world a better place or destroy it. And I thought that was an important contrast to like the movie Miracle, and a lot of, watching a really good team, or, anything that is uplifting and just grabs you and you say, wow, look at that. Yeah. But at the same time, there is this other form of creativity going on in the prison system that is equally as extraordinary on one level, but at the same time, it's to cause harm and to channel that passion into a different form. It would just be amazing.
And you've nailed exactly what I was hoping would come out in that story, and that is that, can you imagine, how much value these people could add to society with this creativity if it was turned in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I often chuckle because I think each of us has what we might call an energy generation system. And in, certain with teams or even within our family, a very simple but poignant example can be given. Do we supply energy or do we suck energy?
Yeah.
And that, we've all felt it. We've been around certain people where you leave and you're tired. And, it's just there's the energy has been taken out of either yourself or the room, and you've been with other people that when you leave, you're energized. And so our point there, and not to get away from the prison a little bit, but that how do we generate that type of energy? And I'm not trying to say that some personalities or others don't, but it's how do we give? How do we add value? And at the end of the day, that's what our goal is with the Hungry Spirit.
Mm. You have a section, Shaping Our Heart, and I think it's really an important piece because it is that inner spirit and that inner drive. And I think often men try to hide that, and that requires a tremendous amount of effort to keep that soft spot, that soft inner peace, that inner essence subdued.
Yeah, for sure. And we try to, again, give it a bit of a sports analogy, but we call it the inner game that fuels the outer game. And that inner game is so important, and it's that confidence, and it's that inside energy that, is so important. And I would agree with you. I think sometimes we look at action and we say, okay, well, we didn't take the right action, because you can see action and you can see behavior. But what's under the, tip of the iceberg? What is you see the tip out of the water, but, that iceberg is much deeper and much broader underneath. And I think that, that's why we try to talk about that, those qualities that allow us to not only see the action, but also develop that inside, that inner game. And something hit me real hard as a young athlete. I was once told, and came to believe this statement, that you have to be a champion before you can become, you have to become a champion before you can win a championship. And I thought that was really, a good sort of analogy for the inner game. It's important to be and not only do.
Right. I think that what you have written has a tremendous transformative effect, because especially, there is that stereotype of hockey players being so brutish and rugged. And just the title of this book, I think, is so integrative, Hungry Spirit, or The Hungry Spirit. And I just think it's brilliant. I think that what you've created here is going to transform on so many different levels the world that we're living in right now. I think it's a very integrative piece, bringing sports and that judgmental attitude of hockey to really helping people recognize their own inner game and their own inner power, and to surrender the judgment and just step into the moment, step into what is, and step into just being who they are.
Well, thank you. And that is the essence of why we authored the book. And when I say we, I mean I have a life partner, my wife Jenny, and obviously I run a lot of this stuff by her, and we discuss it. But I think a lot of the principles have sort of come from 35 years around professional sport, and I really felt that they had there was a value in being able to take them from pro sport and moving them into a broader spectrum of life. These principles, too, I should say, are 7 ingredients or principles that I actually use when I'm dealing with companies or teams or corporations. And so we actually walk through these 7 principles, and we deal. Obviously, we could you could spend a day on each of them. Typically, I do this through a full day or a 2-day session with groups. But the exciting thing for me, the reason I bring that up, is that these principles are not just something that I write about. I've spent the last 5 years really defining these principles with people that I've worked with, and then, it's fun for me because 5 years later I'm writing the book about it. So I feel like we've worked through some of the issues, and here's how this works, and here's how this doesn't work. And so it's not just a fresh, I think this works. We've really spent some time working through these.
Right. I think leadership is an important piece. Leadership is influence, John Maxwell reminds us. And it's interesting because I've been watching this young man play baseball, and I've been hearing through the grapevine that his coach is really, really falling apart. The coach is really, really, knocking the kids down, really, really critical. And that's the old belief of coaching. Wouldn't you say that's the old school?
Yes,
And
Absolutely.
so this young boy is very, very progressive in his viewpoint and is really recognizing that the coach is not helping the team. And so kind of behind the scene, the team has all realigned themselves outside of the coach. And it's a pretty amazing thing, not in a disrespectful way, but they have come together as a team. Even though the coach is over there knocking them all down, they have gathered themselves because they have the passion to win.
Yes.
And it's interesting how many players on the team have gotten really discouraged and how many have really pulled together and said, no, we're winners, we're not losers. And they're in the Big East right now. They're part of the whole championship down in Florida.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty important that team members recognize that they all have leadership qualities. And if the coach is kind of, not really as effective as they can be, because I hear this frequently, especially with high school players, where the coaches can really lose it, and that losing it really has a negative effect on the team without them being aware of it.
Yeah, and it does run right into the hungry spirit. I often challenge leaders, and I love leadership. I love that whole, that's what I went back to school to study, that whole concept of influence. And the challenge to leaders is, if you look at your team, how hungry are they? So in other words, it's everything rises and falls on leadership. So do we have a hungry family? Are we maximizing the potential in our family? Do we have a hungry corporation? And then finally, do we have a hungry baseball team or a football team? And yes, there's ups and downs throughout the season, and we're not, perfect all the time. But I think that, creating, I often talk about, the individual and the corporate or the team cultural hungry spirit. And so it's not only an internal personal thing, it's an external cultural thing. And, I think that we really played that out with the Vancouver Canucks this season as we were coaching them. We could see that, there was a good atmosphere. We don't take all the credit for that. We give players a lot of credit for that. But the atmosphere was progressive. It was a learning atmosphere, and it was an atmosphere that had a great vision towards, accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish. So I think that coaches, of minor baseball teams and of minor sport need to look at, okay, so what is hungry within the context of our team? There might be many moments where there are teachable moments to actually help kids not only play baseball, but also, really stay hungry for life.
Yeah. So cultural will, you use the word cultural will to mean?
Well, cultural will is just like individual will. At the end of the day, I really think that most great things that happen in life are willed.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Because they're not easy, or everybody would do them.
Right.
So when things aren't easy, you have a choice. We can have the pity party and say, well, that's too bad that didn't work out. Or we can say, no, this is going to happen, and we will it. And I think that individually and culturally, we can will, the things that we want to happen. And, when I look at different, we studied Southwest Airlines at school. We studied, many corporations who had that will, that cultural will. And also, it was always as part of a great culture, a dynamic culture, a place where people wanted to be. I have a cousin who is an airline mechanic at Southwest Airlines, and he was saying it's the funniest place in the world, he said, because there's more people that want to come and work in this company than there are people that want to go to Harvard. I mean, people cannot, there's a big lineup of people that want to work there. Well, why is that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
They've built such an amazing culture.
Yeah. People
love working there. So that cultural piece is really what I call hungry.
Okay, I see. So When you use the word will, are you using the word will in the context of focusing your attention and just keeping your attention on that which you want to achieve?
It's a good question. I think that that's part of it, but I think that there's a deep piece in will where we actually have to make a decision. Sometimes, there's tough decisions that have to be made. And I think that part of will is that inner strength that you have to develop.
In your context of will, you're putting that big, you're connecting it with your spirit, that big, powerful part of you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that the will is the spirit. I think it connects closely with making, those types of decisions, those tough decisions that have to be made.
Okay. And it's making those tough decisions from an intuitive sense. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. Intuitive. And I think also for me, I don't know if this is true of your life or our listeners' life, is that there always in life comes down, to some choices. And I think the will is the thing that, helps us make the choice that we look back on and say, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, okay, I understand now. So now I want to get a little bit more in depth in the cultural will, because when you're on a team, are you referring to that team as the cultural will?
There's absolutely, within every team, organization, or so whether it's sport, corporate, family, there ends up being a culture, and because people smell or feel a culture quickly, and they say, "Boy, this is a great place to be, or work, or live," or "Gee, this isn't." And so, for me, the culture is the thing that leaders have to spend their most time developing. And I think many leaders forget that.
Yeah.
That the culture is the key, and that's really what I studied for 3.5 years at the master's level, was how do you create a high-performance culture?
Well, how do you do it?
Well, it would take us a little bit of time to articulate it, but, in a nutshell, and I don't mean to be simplistic, but it points back to how do you stay hungry?
Okay.
Because, when you have a place where people are hungry, they're hungry to achieve, and they're hungry to be there, and they're hungry to be the best they can be, then you've found that ingredient that helps their culture to stay hungry.
Okay, so it's like the connecting their collective value?
Absolutely. And I think values are a big part of culture, in understanding, okay, so who are we before we start talking about what we're going to do.
Okay. So this brings me to an interesting question, I think, anyway. I'm curious about this. You, as a new coach this year with the Canucks, did you incorporate that in your team initially when you came on to coach this year?
From the hungry spirit point of view?
Well, did you gather your team together and say, okay, what is our collective or our cultural will? Who are we before we start to do what we want to do?
We talked a little bit about this, not as much as I would have liked, but there was some work that was done previous to me coming. And so we had a bit of a start there. But no, I would have to admit that, in the world of sport, that there isn't always the energy to sit down and talk about those deeper things. But I think it's important, and in previous teams, I have had the ability to do that, and it's been an important exercise.
Yeah. Did you ever read the book Sacred Hoop by Phil Jackson?
I had read part of it, and I liked it.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book, I think. It was really inspiring to me. It's what got me really moving in this new evolution. I think it's an evolutionary world right now in sports. I'm very excited about what's transpiring.
Yes.
And I got really jazzed by that book. And I'm not an athlete. I don't follow sports. So for me to be really moved And I was very moved, too, by what you wrote, because it's really bringing so many pieces together all in one arena. And
Yes.
I think it's got a powerful effect because when people are in the stands, they are picking up on so much more than just watching the game.
Yes.
And being a healer that I am, I see the effect, the transformative effect on masses amount of people in a world that needs massive change.
Yeah, no, and I like your analogy to sport. I think that's one of the highest callings of sport is to, help our children especially see, not only we can play these values and these ideas out in sport, but that they work in life.
Yeah. Do you coach any young ones?
I coached minor sport for 15 years. We have, Jen and my wife and I have 5 children.
Wow, awesome.
And so, yeah. So
what are their
ages? Now 25 through 14.
Cool.
And so in the early days, I had a chance for 15 years to coach our boys.
Wow. In hockey?
Yes.
They all played hockey?
They all played hockey. There was other sports they played also, but they did like hockey for some reason.
And so you have 4 boys and a girl?
3 boys, 2 girls, and our girls were real active in dance and in other sport. But it was wonderful.
I was thinking about all of this before coming into the studio today, and I was really seeing the effect, of the hungry spirit on all aspects. I started to examine the philosophy that you're presenting in this book with dance and performance and the dance troupe and the Lion King and performances in theater, and just anybody that really reaches down and digs into really the depths of who they are and allow that to come bubbling up. Yes. And then to have the whole synergy, it's so moving to watch that. And I think that people, when they're watching it brings them to their own inner power.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It's very true. And our youngest Emma is, I'm taking her off to dance right now, and she is a fabulous dancer. And the arts bring out, some things that are certainly connected to hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. This quote that you have in here, let's see, I'm going to quote Martin Luther King, Jr. I think this is such a brilliant quote. You wrote that he understood that the root cause of our social problems was spiritual. He says, our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. And he also states, if a man hasn't discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live.
Yeah, no, isn't that an interesting thought?
Yeah. It stops you in your tracks.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
It really does. And, I think that's where Martin Luther King gets a little deeper into, the purpose of, have we found what we would normally live for but die for? And, I'm not sure that I have that figured out yet, but certainly it's a very fabulous and interesting discussion to have.
Do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share?
Well, I just want to thank you and your listeners for this opportunity to discuss the hungry spirit. And, as with most things, it is an exploration. And I would point your people to a couple of websites. We have hungryspirit.com, where we have just a few resources on. RyanWalter.com is another place that if people are interested in exploring this further.
Well, thank you for being here.
Well, I really enjoyed our discussion, and thanks for your great questions.
I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
That'll be fun.
Okay. Well, you take care. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.